Hey, welcome back to Behind the Music of Towns of Legend. Towns of Legend was an EP I put out a few months ago that was 4 tracks inspired by the village and town themes from the Legend of Zelda game series. Back when it released, I talked about the first couple tracks from the record, and it's been a few months now. This summer I got busy doing a lot of other projects that I'm really excited about and will be able to share with you pretty soon. But for now, I wanted to finish off talking about the last 2 tracks from the release, which were Town of Wind and Town of Tears. So first off, talking about Town of Wind. This track was of course inspired by The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. This game released a little over 20 years ago now, and it was actually the first Zelda game that I played as a kid growing up. So there's a lot of nostalgia in this track, and this is the track that I actually spent the least amount of time composing. And that's not out of a lack of care or attention or anything like that, but it's because I had so much nostalgia and so many memories of this game that as soon as I started writing, the song kind of just came together on its own. One thing I will say about this track is it's the track that I used the most live recorded instruments. I mentioned before that I started down this kind of direction doing a lot of woodwind covers of video game themes. And some of the first themes that I covered were from The Wind Waker. So when it came time to write a song in the style of a lot of those towns, it felt like it was very much in my wheelhouse and it came together very quickly. With that background of doing a lot of woodwind covers in the past, it naturally led me to want to incorporate a lot of live woodwinds from this one. And there are a lot of live woodwinds recorded throughout this whole project. But in this track in particular, I wanted them to have a little bit more of the spotlight. So if you look, I actually have the session up here. The green tracks here are the strings, and then here there's one other green track that's just bassoon, just to add a little bit of thickness to the bass clarinet. But everything else was live recorded. So all the percussion, the cajon, the shakers, and then the flutes and clarinets were all recorded. And it was a lot of fun for me to do it that way. It felt a lot like getting back to my roots. So that's one thing that kind of sets Town of Wind apart. One other thing I'll mention is it's interesting doing the video at this point in time because since the release has been out a few months, I can see kind of which tracks have been listened to the most. And Town of the Wind is actually the most listened to track, which is fun for me because it's probably the track I had the most fun making. It came together the quickest, and in some ways it was the easiest to produce just because of how natural it felt for me to make. So it's really fun for me to see that you've all been enjoying listening to it as much as I enjoyed making it. Now switching over to Town of Tears. This is the last track on the album. It comes right after Town of Wind, and it was a very different process to Town of Wind. While Town of Wind came together very quickly, creatively, as soon as I started, the whole song kind of came together. Town of Tears had the most kind of creative development put into it before I even started. So I have this notebook here where I would kind of track the development of the project, kind of give myself a schedule, things like that. But a good chunk of my notes were actually just about Town of Tears. The reason for that is Town of Tears was based off of The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, which is the most recent release in the franchise. One big aspect of the game that appeared in a lot of the marketing was these sky islands, and it seemed like exploring those islands was going to be a huge part of the game. If you've played the game, you know that there's maybe not as much to explore as what a lot of us were hoping for. So while this was maybe a little bit disappointing in the game, it gave me the idea for an interesting creative challenge for this project. And that challenge was to imagine what a village or town might be in one of these sky islands and write village or town music for that island. So I created kind of a whole structure for how I would go about researching and developing this song. So for example, I wrote down, first step was just going to be to listen and take notes on everything that I heard. So for example, there's a lot of alto sax in there, there are a lot of woodwinds kind of voiced in clusters, kind of a lot of washy, a lot of spacey things, a lot of kind of more melancholic music in these sky islands. From there I started to put ideas together in terms of arrangement and structure of the song. So I knew I wanted to start with just saxophone and some woodwind clusters. I knew I wanted some reverb that would sound very shimmery and almost like a synth kind of mixture in the woodwinds. And then I started to think a little bit more programmatically. So I wanted to tell a little bit more of a story with this piece. So while a lot of the previous pieces were more about establishing a vibe or setting up kind of a cozy feeling for any of these villages, this one I wanted to tell a little bit more of a story. So for example, maybe you're playing the game and you're traveling through the sky islands, there's these clouds that are kind of obscuring your view, but as you continue exploring, the clouds start to part, you start to be able to see a little bit more and make out this grand town or grand village. So that's why this track has a little bit more of a progression to it, a little bit more of an arc. So that's it for Behind the Music of Towns of Legend. Thank you so much to everyone who's listened to it. This is the first project I put out in this format, and I wasn't really sure if anyone would even listen to it at all, but it's been so fun to see people listen to it, people streaming it. And thank you so much to those who bought the album and supported it on Bandcamp. That really means a lot. I have some more music that I'll be able to announce very soon and some of these other projects that I've been working on, but for now I just wanted to say thank you again so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.